Hello, I'm Monica Price and welcome to CuppaTV. On today's show we have emotions expert John Rushton and we're paying tribute to my special friend Angela Prophet, who sadly passed away recently. My first guest is emotion expert John Rushton. John, thank you so much for joining me again on CuppaTV.
My pleasure, Monica.
So John, today we're going to talk about mental health.
Yes.
Which is that, do you see that as an issue?
I don't see it as an issue. I think people need to talk about it physically more than they do. People talk a lot about it, but not about it itself. They talk about what you should do and think and whatever, but it varies from person to person.
That's interesting. You said that people talk about it, but not about it. And
Yes.
I think that's something perhaps some of my viewers would be, you know, actually coming to sort of, they can actually relate to that, if you like. So
Yes.
what is it about mental health that we just don't want to speak about it?
I think it's one of those very personal things. We're quite robust people as people. If there's something wrong with us physically, we can go to the chemist and get something for our headache, our stomachs. If you have a rash, we get cream, we get bruises and cuts, and we're fine. But when it comes to our mental health, oof, we just don't do things like that. We may take some tranquilizers. We may have a glass or two of wine more than we should, just to anesthetize ourselves, but it doesn't help. It only makes matters worse because they're only putting off what the root cause is. And quite often the root cause for most people is not that significant. It's something which is there but they haven't tackled. They just put into the back room, close the door and hope it'll go away. Well, sometimes over time itself it does go away because time manifests and makes things go away. But quite often what it is which is bothering us is something like having toothache in the back of our mind. It's just there going tick, 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 tick. And it drives us absolutely wild. And all we do is subsume ourselves in our thought process. And if we subsume ourselves in our thought process, we look at the problem, not the solution. And sometimes also we're frightened to actually tackle it for fear that it may sort of unleash other things in our mind as well.
Yeah, I think you've tapped on there. You know, having some experience of it myself, it is people don't want to address it or maybe look at the things that could be a problem with it.
Yes, and if there's something happening in your life which is not that savoury, and it happens to everybody on the planet. Everybody happens to have it sometime in their lives, sometimes multiple times, because we don't know what's going to happen in the future. And things happen. We can plan things, but stuff happens in life. I think one of the things also is that many people don't address it because they don't like to talk about it for fear of what other people may think. That, ooh, they have mental problems, mental health problems, they are this, they are that. And it's not true. Because if you actually open up to most people and say, oh, I've been there, I've had that, I understand exactly where you've been. Most people actually want to sort of empathise with you straight away and think, oh, give you that sort of mental hug. Yes. Oh, I've been there, I understand totally what you're saying.
It's almost like a taboo, isn't it,
yes.
not to be spoken about. Now, is that a British thing? Do you feel that in other countries they deal better and cope better with mental health issues? Or do you think it's just across the world it's exactly the same?
I think it's a taboo subject across the world, and I've been around the world endless times, and I've seen it in every country. And it doesn't matter how sort of open you are at talking, if you don't actually talk about it, mental health, then you're not talking about it, you're talking around it. You're giving or quoting people or quoting quotes with other people or quoting celebrities who've been through this and now they've got that. But that's not the solution. That's them, not you. You have got to talk about you. And it's not being selfish or self-centered. If you can't talk about you and your most inner thoughts and feelings, who can? You're the only one. And you really must respect yourself. You really must love yourself. Because if you can't actually open this empathy and allow it to all flow out and actually be transparent and understanding. It's all down to yourself. You really must do that.
And it affects all ages, doesn't it, John? It's not just mental health issues have happened in the young and the old. It's at all ages. Would you agree with that?
Totally. It can happen to anybody, any age. And it doesn't matter whether you're well-heeled or not, or what state of life you're in, or where you've come from. Mental health is all about looking after your state of mind. And it's like in your body. If you overfeed yourself, you put on weight, or you get out of shape, or you get out of sorts. And it's the same with your mind. If you feed your mind on stuff which is not important, and you dwell on that, what is your mind going to do? It's going to think about it, because you filled it, all these memory banks, with all that detritus, all that superfluous information, which has no bearing on yourself whatsoever. And it's very important then you look upon yourself and think, does that concern me? It's not being selfish or self-centered. It's putting you in pole position, because you're the only one that can do that. You know, you've got to actually float around your own equilibrium and not somebody else's or anybody else's, or what the press say or what the media says or what somebody's purporting. This is the kind of life you need to wear these clothes, you need to have this food, this is the car, this is the nightclub. Fine, but if you're not there yourself, then it's all superfluous, it means nothing. When you are in pole position of your life, you can tackle anything. And you see life better, more clearly and more defined. You feel better in yourself. You feel revitalized. You feel at one with yourself. And you can understand what's happening, and you can see all the foibles of other people and think, I'm not going there. I've been there. And you can actually, then you look at yourself and you think, you know, I'm really quite a good person. I'm really quite strong. And you are. But most people don't think that. They think, oh, I need help for this, I need help for that. Maybe you do. But if you don't start, you'll never know.
So would you say that having good friends around you, good support system, good family, does that help people with mental health issues?
It can do. I think it's very important to have one or two people around you who understand. You can't sort of legislate that your family are going to be the best people around you. Your family, to you, are the people who support you come hell or high water. They will support you when you do silly things and support you when you do good things. And those are the people you need. Maybe, just maybe, your parents or your family or your very close friends can't support you because maybe they don't understand. And it's this understanding, this mutual understanding, this empathy, this sympathy, this sort of oneness you can get from one or two people who you can literally cry on their shoulder. And they understand, they know, and that is so cathartic. It's a release of the stress inside that you can say what you want and not feel that there's going to be any sort of riposte of, oh, none of that business. This is, I understand.
So sometimes, in fact, would you say it might be better to speak to a stranger, you know, a counsellor, or just somebody, a stranger you haven't met before, or, which is why people go to counsellors, I assume, that, you know, to talk through your problems. Would you say that would be a good thing?
It could be a good thing. I think in the first instance, I would always recommend somebody talking to a friend or to somebody you don't know or somebody you respect. You've got to make sure it's the right kind of person, otherwise you're just talking ad lib for the sake of it. But that is very, very good, because there's nothing that they can actually pick up of your past or anything else. Listening is a fine art today. Most people listen with the intention of answering, not with the intention of understanding. It's actually coming back and putting their point of view first. Oh, you should do this, you shouldn't do that, whatever it is. And that's not the answer. It's somebody who can understand. And if you find that one or two or three people in your life that can understand, that is an enormous burden off your shoulders, because once you've said it, you've freed yourself from those confines which is holding it all in, those straps which are actually tight and just like a mental corset. It's just keeping you all in there and you can't do anything. But by undoing it all, you feel open, you feel more at ease with yourself, and you think, wow, I've actually physically said it, I've expressed it. And you do listen to yourself when you talk. Most people don't understand that, but people who whinge and moan a lot do so because that's all what they hear. They hear themselves whinge and moan. And therefore, if you say things about yourself or you keep it bottled up, you're churning it over in your mind, regurgitating the situation, and you're not getting anywhere. Just to say it, it is just so sort of opening of yourself to life and to what you want to do.
And do you think the governments are doing, I mean, we're going through an election at the moment, John, do you think the government is looking at these issues that we have?
I think they're talking about it, but they're not talking about it. They're going through the checklist of things which sound good. And I think a lot of people, a lot of organisations, a lot of councils talk about it, and there's a lot on their websites about talking about it. But when push comes to shove, it's would you trust yourself talking to that person or those people or that organisation? There are some brilliant people out there, but there are also some people who are in the profession themselves who actually need more help than their clients. And I think you've got to make the judgment yourself. Do you feel comfortable with that person? And if you don't feel comfortable after a few minutes talking to them, then stop.
That's lovely, John. Well, we're going to have to leave it there, I'm afraid, but thank you so much for joining me again. Thank you.
My pleasure.
We're just going to take a quick break, but come back again and join us after the break. Welcome back. CuppaTV would now like to pay tribute to my very dear friend Angela Prophet, who appeared on one of our very first shows and who recently sadly passed away. She was a wonderful, inspirational woman, and I miss her very, very dearly. Now, my next guest was told in 2001 that she only had 12 months to live after being diagnosed with ovarian cancer. But she has proved the doctors wrong and survived with amazing courage and determination. I'd like to give a very big, warm CuppaTV welcome to Angela Prophet.
Thank you.
Angela, thank you so much for coming on the show today. So, Angela, my first question to you really is, how did your journey begin here with your cancer? Tell me a little bit about how you felt after your diagnosis and were told you only had 12 months to live.
Well, it was a great shock. I thought I was very active. I swam, I did yoga, and probably I thought I was the least person ever to get cancer. But I'd been going for 18 months backwards and forwards to my doctor with various symptoms, which I realise now were symptoms of ovarian cancer. And I went to work on the last Friday in April, never realising that I was never going to go back again. I was told by a surgeon that I had ovarian cancer that had spread to my lungs, and he said, quite frankly, I don't give you very much hope, but I'll operate next Wednesday.
Because you've managed to survive, which is just wonderful.
Yes.
And I mean, it's known as the silent killer,
Yes.
ovarian cancer.
Yes.
And would you agree with that? That's the,
No.
people just are diagnosed. What would you say to people that are going through the same as you, Angela?
Well, it isn't the silent cancer. I always say it's the neglected cancer. People aren't listening to us. The symptoms are so similar to IBS.
Really?
But apparently you don't just get IBS over 50, and I was 57 when I was diagnosed. And all my symptoms, bloatedness.
Yes, tell us the symptoms, Angie.
Right.
What
Well, for
symptoms?
me, it was pains down the side, it was bloatedness, and as I got larger and larger, and I kept going to the doctor and she kept saying it was IBS. I went to a gynecologist. Even she didn't seem to be alarmed. I had an ultrasound, and I was told that there was water fluid in my abdomen. And I said, oh, what does that mean? And he said, oh, it's probably a red herring. And then unknown to me, they accidentally filed my notes instead of sending them to a specialist, which probably would have made my life very different, because this was 6 months before I was diagnosed.
Did you have a bucket list? Did you have a wish list that you wanted to achieve? Did you even think about doing something like that?
No. When I went into hospital and had surgery, I was really so ill afterwards. And I kept remembering thinking what I couldn't do. I kept thinking, I will never marry John, who had been my partner. I'll never see my first grandchild, and I'll never go to Venice. And then when I came out of hospital, I went into my garden, something happened to me. The birds were singing, I could smell the May blossom. And when I looked around at all this beauty, I suddenly made a decision. And this was my defining moment. I was not going to die. I was going to prove them all wrong and to live. And so I turned those negatives into positives, and they became my goals to live for. And within a year, we got married. We went to Venice. And at the end of that year, my very first grandchild, Ben, arrived. And now between us, we've got 9. And I would have never have dreamed it was possible. But as I went on my journey, I began to believe that if he wanted anything very much, then anything was possible.
And I'm joined by some friends. Angela, now you were talking about, just before the break, we were talking about what has changed in your life. So how has cancer changed your life?
Well, I worked for the BBC for 37 years, and I thought this was what made life exciting. And when I had cancer, they held my job open for quite a few years. But because I had changed and I had moved forward, I decided that it was time to retire. And I started getting involved with Macmillan. I was asked to do talks. I'd never done a talk in my life. And if anyone said that I could have possibly stood there in front of hundreds of people, in front of the House of Lords, I would never have believed it possible.
Wow.
But because I believe so passionately about getting the message across of hope and not despair, I used to lose all my nervousness. I was asked to do a 6-week, well, I've done quite a few, programme on living with cancer for Macmillan, and about 16 people used to come. They were all so nervous, in tears on that first day. By week 4, they were smiling. They started making goals. And at week 6, it was wonderful to see the change in people. I've been asked to do photo shoots in the Daily Mail where we had this wonderful makeup artist.
Wonderful, yes.
Yes.
And do you find these things exciting? Angie?
Yes.
Do you enjoy them?
Yes, people said, why, when you're going through this terrible chemo, are you putting yourself through these things? But they actually brought me alive, if I'm honest. And I realised I was on an entirely different journey, and I always felt that this was what was meant to be. And I always say, if you can't cope with it, then they don't give it to you. And I learned to cope. I learned to fight for every scan. I learned to fight for every appointment. When I went to have cancer, when I went to have chemo, people used to say, I hate it. It's poison going through. And I used to regard it as a gold light going through, healing myself. So I used to learn tactics to help myself through. I've done so many things. And as I say, on my bucket list, one of them was that I always wanted to go to South Africa. And I did. And I've always loved elephants. And one day we were 5 o'clock in the morning on a game reserve and watching the elephants at a distance. And suddenly one broke away from her herd, came across to me and started to gently stroke my cheeks with her trunk. And then she went back to her family. And the ranger had never seen it happen before. And I will never know why, but I will never forget that moment. I wanted to cycle across the San Francisco Bridge, and I did. I would never have done any of these things had I not had cancer, but it makes you appreciate life.
Okay, thank you, Angie. And now we're joined by Lisa. Lisa, if you'd like to come in and join us, thank you.
Hello.
Lisa Farrington-Martin, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
You specialise in providing wigs to women that are going through cancer treatment and alopecia.
That's right.
And you brought some wigs along to
Yes.
show us today. So Lisa, would you like to just tell us a little bit about what you've brought along today?
What we find is that ladies who are going through cancer treatment or chemotherapy at the moment, generally there may be some days where perhaps they're not feeling 100% or they haven't quite got the energy to bother doing their own hair. And with a human hair wig, that's what you have to do.
So you treat it exactly the same as you would do human hair?
You do, more or less. But you have to sort of wash it as you do with normal hair, style it, dry it, all of those things. So the big advantage with having an artificial wig or an acrylic wig is that they're already done for you.
Right, I see.
So they come from the manufacturer in these styles. There is a very small element of alteration that you can do to them.
Yes, I mean, can I cut it, or is it something that you can do, or is it just sort of as it is?
Yeah, you can cut them. I mean, sometimes the fringes come a little bit longer when they come from the manufacturer, and the idea is you can take them to your normal hairdresser and just get the fringe slightly styled.
Yes.
Because the depth of people's forehead does differ.
Yes, that's true, yes.
But generally, they stay in the style that you've brought them in.
And what sort of service do you provide for women? Because I can imagine it's a very traumatic time for a woman to come into you. So what service do you provide to the women that come into your store?
We've got some very large fitting rooms upstairs, which are big enough to have the client in, and also some friends and family if they want to bring them.
Yes.
So we tend to take them upstairs, make them all a cup of tea, and then just have a chat to them about what they want. And generally, the customer usually says to us, I just want to feel like myself again. Because they're usually in the very early stages of hair loss at that point. Sometimes they leave it until they have lost their hair completely, and then they come in and see us. But the majority of the time they say, I just want to feel and look like me again. So we give them that privacy. So there's me in there as a wig fitter, and then there's the friends and family too. And what we usually find is that after they've tried on a couple of styles and their friends have usually sort of been laughing at how they look, or, you know, in a very nice way, very gentle way, then they get their confidence and they start trying on different styles. And we find that in the end, it's not just the client that's trying on the wigs, it's all their friends and family too. So it actually turns into a bit of a party atmosphere sometimes.
As us girls are wont to have. And would you say that, it's something that women, it's a very traumatic time, as we've said, to come into your store. So, but you would just recommend for somebody to come in, have a proper, if you like, advice from you, someone like yourself.
Yes.
And take on board what you say, and that can make their confidence a lot better, is that right?
Exactly.
That's it for today. I would like to thank John for joining me, and it was wonderful to see Angela there today as well. Please do get in touch with the show, either by email or join us on Facebook or Twitter at Big Centre TV. Come back and join me again tomorrow. Take care. Bye-bye.